Peter Jackson is most well known for the Lord of the Rings and subsequent Hobbit series, or maybe you know him from King Kong or The Lovely Bones, or even his recent Beatles documentary, or something else he's done. But we'll start somewhere, yes, even Peter Jackson. This video specifically is going to be a retrospective about what I call his B-grade trilogy. Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, and Dead Alive aka Braindead. These films aren't connected story-wise, they're just all done by Peter Jackson prior to Lord of the Rings. But what you may not know is that they all held or hold some form of record, or at least have an interesting story behind them. These aren't the only films he did before the Lord of the Rings though. He also made Heavenly Creatures, Forgotten Silver, and The Frighteners. Heavenly Creatures is a great film, as is The Frighteners, but I wouldn't consider them B-grade, and I haven't seen Forgotten Silver. All I know is it's a mockumentary of sorts. But I do know about the B-grade trilogy. Despite them all coming out before I was born, they were quite influential in my film taste. By some definitions, the latter two films may not be considered B-grade due to their budget, with the budgets being $25k, $750k, and $3 million respectively. Although in saying that, Rotten Tomatoes does state the following: though he began his career making gory and often witty horror comedies in his native New Zealand, director Peter Jackson went on to become one of the most successful and innovative filmmakers of his generation. Jackson first earned a reputation for churning stomachs with the bizarre and bloody B-grade movies Bad Taste, 1987, Meet the Feebles, 1990, and Dead Alive, 1993. Bad Taste began as a 20-minute short called Roast of the Day. According to New Zealand On Screen, the majority of funding was created by earnings Peter made from working for a newspaper, with the New Zealand Film Commission giving him the rest of the money towards the end of shooting the film. It was shot over weekends over the span of 4 years, allegedly to accommodate for weekend soccer matches. With the budget being $25k, it made sense that Peter would be the main actor and his friends play the other roles. Why waste money when you can do it yourself? The film has multiple references that I didn't get on my first watch, and some I still don't understand because it was before my time, except of course Derek's scarf probably being a Doctor Who reference. I got that one. Peter plays Derek, who leads a service called Alien Detection and Investigation Service, or simply known as AIDS. Although this is what it says on the website, other places state that it's actually called the Astro Investigation and Defense Service, and that actually does spell AIDS, whereas Alien Detection and Investigation Service doesn't. But regardless, what a different time 1988 was. Peter also built a lot of things used in the film himself, including baking the masks that were used in his mother's oven. Towards the start of the film, they find the town has been overrun by man-eating space aliens disguised as humans in blue shirts. The man who played Giles, who we see a bit later, had an odd relationship with the film, in more ways than one, because it wasn't just the film that he had an odd relationship with, it was also his real-life relationships. As it says, he was married and then divorced within the 4-year time frame it took to make the film, and was at one point written out of the film because his wife, at the time, objected to him working on Sundays due to religious beliefs, but after they divorced, he was back in. These aliens of course have a leader, Lord Crumb. He is who's seen on some of the cover art, depending on where you are in the world, either giving the finger, sticking up to, or holding a gun, or some other variant. He was played by Doug Wren, in what is probably the saddest part of this story. Although this was his last role in the film, he is unfortunately never heard in the movie, despite being in it and in the cover art. This was due to the recording equipment and likely Peter's inexperience at the time. Despite being shot on film, this was video only, so despite Doug being in the film, no usable audio existed of him. It was all dubbed in post by someone else, Peter Veer Jones, who would later also appear in Braindead and one of the Hobbit movies, who unfortunately passed away in 2021. This was apparently due to Peter hiring a sound camera after gaining funding and doing it to a higher standard. There's a lot of funny and interesting trivia behind the film, but my favourite is what happened in Queensland. Maybe this is because I'm Australian myself. Don't worry, I don't live in Queensland. There's nothing wrong with Queensland, but me not living there is kind of important to this next part. In 1990, the film was banned in Queensland. Yes, you heard that right, banned. It is honestly one of my favourite film-related stories because it's just strange. Maybe even stranger than the film itself, honestly. The banning of the film in the Australian state of Queensland in 1990 is regarded as the main reason for why the Queensland Film Board of Review was disbanded. Workers of the QFBOR regarded it as too violent, even though it was already a censored version and the film had been approved by the New Zealand Film Commission. The nationwide Australian OFLC saw the workers as unprofessional for banning an approved film that was already censored and subsequently disbanded them. Screen Rant wrote, "Bad Taste is not a long film, and the edits that Australia's OFLC administered to it only amount to a little over a minute. Even so, they removed some of the outlandish examples of gore in the film, such as when the half-headless alien wanders around, the repeated nailing into the alien's foot, or the gun barreling stick through and firing out of the alien's torso. It's mostly the money shots to these gruesome setups. It's also no coincidence that most of these moments are the film's most beloved scenes. The acceptable amount of censorship was administered, but the Queensland Film Board of Review still got cold feet and decided to pull the film from theatres after it had been out for only 3 weeks. In some extreme cases, like in Germany, Bad Taste wouldn't receive a theatrical release until the year 2000, and even used the Lord of the Rings success in the film's marketing. Screen Rant go into a little more detail about feelings towards the ban, saying, "Both the New Zealand Film Commission and Australia's Official Classification Board thought it was unprofessional and offensive. The Queensland Film Board would still go on to ban the film that they had already administered edits towards. Ultimately, all these events only built for more publicity for Jackson's tiny film, and the home video release was one of the final videos in Australia to have "Banned in Queensland" printed on it. It wasn't until 2004 that a fully uncut version was released in Australia." Although it was teased many years ago that they were in the process of being made, Bad Taste has not yet received a 4K release. Although not all hope is lost, Bad Taste has at least been released on Blu-ray in Germany. These do give you the ability to watch in English though, and German of course. Who knows, maybe one day it'll happen and this film can be seen in all its glory. Jackson's follow-up, 1989's Meet the Feebles, is by all accounts essentially an R-rated Muppets. The film centers around a cast of a fictional stage show called The Feebles Variety Hour, although the film of course goes where no Muppet film has gone before, exploring things like adultery, drug use, and even gang warfare. It's said there was originally going to be a single episode of a show, like a pilot, but once funding fell through for Braindead, it was expanded into a full film instead. Initially, the New Zealand Film Commission rejected the funding of the project, although later giving 2/3 of the $750,000 budget. Oddly enough, the commission executive at the time the funding was rejected actually went on and produced the film itself. Although the film fell behind schedule, leading to the New Zealand Film Commission removing its credit from the film is deliberately over the top, with some of it not holding up overly well in this day and age, like a rabbit with AIDS. Although in saying that, AIDS was also used as a joke in Bad Taste, but regardless. This film also isn't shy about having a show tune or two, or more accurately, there's 24 tracks on the soundtrack according to Google. New Zealand on Screen accurately state there's even more Bad Taste than Bad Taste, and that's not even by today's standards. It was very out there for its time even. Just like Bad Taste, the first time I saw this film was on VHS. Most of the film takes place inside a studio where the Variety Hour takes place, outside of a few scenes, including one where a walrus is playing golf and a Vietnam flashback for a frog, who seemingly as a result is addicted to heroin. I bring this up because it's apparently filmed under the title Frogs of War. Multiple scenes were in fact. Meet the Feebles really pushes the envelope, but there's no doubt that it is what it's trying to actually do. Sometimes you have to do that to get noticed. Fortunately, the film is actually decently made, holding over a 70% rating on Rotten Tomatoes to date. Despite this and its now cult status, the film only grossed $80,000 in New Zealand. It was thrust into the spotlight after Peter's success with Lord of the Rings, screening at 8 different film festivals between 2001 and 2003, according to New Zealand Film. Speaking of releases, its public premiere was in Hamburg in 1990, being released in Japan the same year, and multiple countries by the end of 1991, with the US not getting it until 1995, although it is, still to this day, from what I can find, banned in Ireland. Peter would actually give the film a shout out at the 2004 Oscars, stating that the film, along with Bad Taste, had been wisely overlooked by the Academy. Although one of the stranger moments in the film's history would come in 2023, when the movie became canon in the Muppets universe, which obviously the film is parodying, with Peter Jackson making a cameo in the series Muppets Mayhem. where quote-unquote Floyd Pepper says the electric mayhem hasn't caught up with them since that night in Wellington when we met the Feebles. Also goes on to say that 2 are in witness protection and the rest are in prison. The physical media releases are in a similar state to Bad Taste, with 4K remaster also being teased. Unfortunately, all that currently exists is the VHS and the DVD. Germany hasn't even given it the Blu-ray treatment like they did with Bad Taste. But in somewhat good news, there's a fan 4K restoration on YouTube that looks really good. So until something official happens, that will be the best bet. Now, last but not least, Braindead. Last but certainly not least is Braindead, or Dead Alive as it was known in America. It's probably obvious, but this was due to there being a film called Braindead in America. It was a film made a few years prior starring Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton and George Kennedy. Now that's out of the way, let's talk about the film. Peter was no stranger to splatter films as demonstrated in the aforementioned films, but this took it to a whole nother level, creating some interesting history. One of my favourite film facts of all time in fact, which we'll talk about in a bit. But first, let's talk about the other history of the film. The planning for the film started around the time of Bad Taste, with Fran Walsh, Steven Sinclair and Peter meeting, deciding among themselves that they wanted to make a zombie film, which ended up resulting in Braindead. New Zealand on screen going on to give interesting details, like the fact that it was potentially going to be a co-production with a Spanish company, which is why the film has a Spanish lead actress, and although the deal ultimately fell through, the actress was so good that she remained in the film. It may seem out of place, but does anything really seem out of place when your mother turns into a zombie after being bitten by a deadly rat monkey? Honestly, I don't think so. Outside of this, it does its best to be a romantic film too. What a way to try and win someone's heart through a zombie onslaught. Due to the graphic nature of the film, multiple versions of the film exist for different countries, with multiple countries having cut versions of the film. The film is banned in multiple countries such as South Korea and Singapore from what I can find, although Australia and the UK got the full film. America got 2 versions, the unrated version which is 97 minutes and the R-rated version which is 85 minutes. Weirdly enough, according to IMDb, Hungary, despite the original uncut version being released in cinemas and VHS, it has not had an upgraded release to date in that country. Another of one of many of the interesting things listed about this film on IMDb says, residents noticed the red contamination flowing near Avalon Studios where the film was shot and alerted the authorities fearing there'd been a massacre. As with the other films mentioned, this also did the rounds at film festivals years after its release, between 2001 and 2003. But my favourite fact about the film is that until the mid-2010s, it was, as far as I know, the bloodiest film ever made, based on how much fake blood was used, which I like as an obscure fact. The title was held by a 1990s B-grade New Zealand film for 20 years or so. Like Bad Taste, Braindead has had a Blu-ray release in Germany, and also still remains unreleased in 4K to date, just like the rest of the trilogy of course. Let me know which of these 3 are your favourites. Having seen all 3, my most watched is Meet the Feebles. I somehow managed to get them all on DVD. Bad Taste was released on DVD and somewhat easy to find, but the other 2 I managed to find copies of in the wild. They look like the most bootlegged copies you've ever seen, but they are apparently official, although my copy says Dead Alive on the front. But I will say, I found them in a shop in Australia that sells genuine DVDs, so I don't know. The same versions I have are also for sale on eBay, so they must have had some sort of wide country release in Australia, maybe. Here's photos of them, by the way. If you want to see any of the films, they're all on YouTube for free. So if this sounds interesting, you can check them out and come back and let me know which one you enjoyed most, if you haven't seen them. Thanks for watching this video, by the way. I know it's been a long time since uploads on here. I started writing this video earlier this year and I've wanted to make it for a few years now. I have a few other obscure videos that I really want to make that I'll get around to making in time. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day and peace.